To do an aid in app. So that's a question that we ask ourselves, but generally it's the wrong question. What we should be asking is this one: do my customers need an app? Good reasons to have an app if it's something that's genuinely going to improve the customer's experience. So at Just Eat, we were always looking at more ways to drive traffic to the app. So I sold my business to Just Eat in 2012, and their app was already launched. I wasn't there at the launch stage for that one. But with the app, it was a much better experience. The menus could be cached, the payment checkout was better, it was much better. So there were lots of benefits to driving consumers from the app. The consumers that spoke, they wanted an app. So that's why that app was launched and why consumers were driven there. And app users were generally more sticky, so they would just come back. There were other benefits as well to having an app. So some of the strong benefits for Just Eat was that if people had the app, then they wouldn't be clicking through to Google, because as you know, you don't just search in justeat.com or whatever it is. You go to Google, you search Just Eat or whatever you're searching for, click the first link. That's generally a paid link. And the cost per acquisition takeaway back then was between £1 and £3, which actually gobbled up the commission on the order. So bear in mind, these are already existing customers that are then Googling, clicking on a paid link and literally just cannibalizing the revenue. So AdWords cost was ridiculously high for takeaway back then, and the commission is low. The commissions are a lot higher now, but then it was 12%. So 12% of a £20 booking, you can see it very, very quickly can get cannibalized. I mean, that's a problem, right? But it's a nice problem to have because there's customers there, and then you can start to drive them towards the app. A reason not to have an app is vanity. Now, unfortunately, a lot of people vanity makes these decisions for them. So I often hear things like, we need our own app. We have to be true to our brand. Like, it has to be our own. It has to be white labeled. We have to own all of that stuff. And people get so hung up on this concept of what their brand is and how it needs to be protected. And this can almost skew the decision sometimes. So just because you need to protect your brand, like, I'm afraid that's just not a reason. In the majority of cases, like, I haven't heard any strong arguments. Yes, if you've got a huge company like Nike or Apple or anything, then of course you're going to need your own app. And even some, slightly small companies, that's going to be the best decision for them. But you really need to question whether vanity is getting in the way of your decision to launch your own app. So yeah, takeaways and restaurants would say to me that it didn't fit their brand and they wanted to build their own. Like, granted, some of those people had a lovely Italian restaurant in the town's high street, but the way they spoke about their brand, it was just over and above what everybody actually wanted. They thought they were too good to be listed on a takeaway website, but their consumers, their customers actually wanted something else. The reason that people use apps like Just Eat, Deliveroo now, and all the others, because you get the choice, you get the convenience. So customers actually want to have that choice. You're not going to eat from that same restaurant day in, day out. And I'm not trying to tell you Just Eat in any way, but it's the reason that consumers wanted that app. So Uber is a great example of a good app. And this is what I mean by like, oh, your customers currently losing out. This would be a really strong reason to actually spend your time, effort, energy building that app, putting something together. So when you think about Uber, I mean, Uber is huge. I know they're not technically profitable yet, but they're worth billions, like super billions, if that's a number. So to do the stuff that Uber do, there is no getting away from needing an app, like with the localization, locations, and all that stuff. Like, it would be extremely difficult not to use an app. But the reason Uber won in so many countries, and I'm going to use like London as an example because we can probably relate to this better. Uber won in London because people don't like hanging around for cabs, right? You don't like having to go outside. Now with Uber, you can just literally wait till the second it's arrived and then get in. Like, you don't even have to pay them, right? It just happens automatically. So, I can focus on the important stuff, like not spilling the chili sauce from the kebab that I've got stuffed in my pocket at 4 a.m. Like, this is why Uber have won. When you look at like the Licensed Taxi Association, the LTDA, I can't remember what they are. I did Google them last night. Like, they failed because actually launching an app to bring together black cabs was exactly what customers wanted. They just wanted that choice and convenience to be able to just order a taxi whenever they wanted. But they failed. Now, yesterday, as I said, I went onto their page to find out what their name was, and they still had a big banner on their Facebook page saying the real cost of getting an Uber. Like, who cares? So they're trying to force Uber out instead of focusing on their own customer experience. And in that case, testing an app and testing that market could have really, really helped them. But they're still playing catch up. They're still fighting against this. And consumers speak with their feet, right? They speak with their wallet. So consumers are using an app and build an app. I can't tell you the amount of cabs I've gotten in London where they've had a bin bag over the card machine because the driver doesn't want to pay the card fees. I mean, it's so small-minded. Like, how is that helping the customer at all? So if you feel an app is genuinely going to improve your customer experience, then you should start to look at that. Now, I'm not saying go and build it now. I'm going to cover exactly how we do that in the next section.
How do you test whether it's a good idea without putting a ton of money into it? I think we're talking about that.
We are. That's the next bit. Great question. That's exactly what we're doing into the next section.
And yeah, how often do people develop apps when they don't really need them? And is there a reason that this happens?
Yes, there is. It's really common. And yeah, loads of people do it. So how do I decide if I need an app? So what we need to do is we need to look at your business and how it's growing and all that sort of stuff. Now, I draw, when I'm with clients, this is generally what I draw on whiteboards and things. So as any business, this is the magic sort of line that we would want. It's the revenue over time, and then we start to get like almost that hockey stick. And when you look at companies like Uber, Dropbox, Spotify, all those sort of things, Netflix, this is generally what you've got. Now, the problem when people see this sort of graph and their sort of revenue, you can make assumptions and you can come to conclusions. People will ask, what happened here? Like, exactly what was it that caused this huge influx of revenue? All of these customers suddenly started to love you. The answer is generally nothing. Like, nothing happened at that point. And this is especially relevant now. Like, this wasn't the point that they launched their app or did anything special. Yes, sometimes you can have great ideas that get some traction, but nothing generally. There's never one thing that can cause that. So if you're there looking for this silver bullet, then you're not going to find it. And an app is not a silver bullet for your business. So what did cause the growth then? Well, actually, it's all the things that you tested, tried, failed, tested, tried, succeeded, tested, tried, failed. And generally 80% of the things you'll test will fail. So yeah, it's all of these things. These are the things that you need to be focusing on. It's running experiments in your business. It's testing loads of stuff out. This is what works. So this is the stuff that I talk about a lot. So how do we come back to that? So the first thing you need to understand, like if you're thinking of doing an app, you have to be on top of your KPIs. So a KPI, if you don't know, it stands for Key Performance Indicator, but it's just a way of measuring something. It's just a way of measuring something important. Like if you were going on a diet, right? And this is something that, I'm constantly dieting, weight's going up, down. It's especially in lockdown when I'm just literally eating everything that I can lay my hands on. If you were going on a diet, you wouldn't do it without getting weighed. You wouldn't do it without measuring, or maybe you're checking with your Genes Fit. You have a way of measuring, and generally you're either writing that down or inputting it into an app or whatever. So it's really important to measure everything that you do. So understanding those KPIs actually helps us focus on the things that are important right now, and that may be an app. But it may not. There may be other things, and that's what I want to talk about. These are the general sort of overhead KPIs that I use with the people that I work with. You can apply them pretty much to any business. They're actually called pirate metrics if you want to do a little bit more Googling about them. And that's because of the AARR. Anyway, bad joke, certainly not mine. So these are the sales funnel metrics of any business: acquisition, activation, retention, referral, revenue. If you understand what things need the most work on your business, then you can focus your time and energy on those. So the reason that I'm talking about this now is that if you haven't got a business yet, if your business doesn't exist, if it's just an idea, then you need to be looking at acquisition. Even above that, there's a stage called awareness, like literally like figuring out whether this is something that people want. So this is the mistake, and this sort of answers the question, do I see this a lot? Yes, I do. What I see is someone has a business idea, and then they might ask a few family and friends and say, oh, what do you think of this? Oh, yeah, that's good. And then they'll go ahead and build it, because they think that they have to build it first before they can test whether they can sell it. But an app, or even just sort of a business in general, will generally be part of it's either activation, which is like the first meaningful interaction for a customer. So that could be when they've actually downloaded the app. Could be retention. In the instance I was talking about Just Eat earlier, it helped people come back to Just Eat. Or it could be referral. It could be then, someone's going to work the next day and saying, have you heard about this app? It's amazing. It could be all of those things, but it generally isn't acquisition. And the top of the funnel is what needs working on first. You need to understand whether customers are actually going to want to download that. So to answer someone's question earlier, like you can run some Facebook ads, you could build a landing page saying download our app and send traffic to that. If you've got customers already and maybe you're thinking about launching an app, you can send them an email saying, like literally, download our app, it's available today. And when people click on it, it's almost, they can just be taken to actually, it's not quite ready yet, coming soon page, register your interest. But you can track every single interaction, and that's called a smoke test. Yes, by doing that, that it's not necessarily, people might think it's deceptive, but what you're doing is you're testing interaction. You're testing to see whether people want that. It's a little bit harder to do at the beginning, and it can seem a little bit uncomfortable. But by doing that, you can save yourself so much time, energy, and money on what could have actually just be a vanity project. And this is what I've seen so many times. So when you're starting anything, and an app is a really good example, it's always good to ask yourself, because we make assumptions. We make assumptions on a lot of things, always. And when I see investment decks, it's, you can have a new business and it's just filled with revenue forecasts and all this sort of stuff. And, it's, yes, someone's taken the time to model that, but it's all bullshit, right? Because it's just modeled on assumptions. And what I prefer to see as an investor is not just some bullshit assumptions of, we think we're going to get this and we think the market's this big. It's like, so what? I want to see whether you've been testing stuff out and what you've learned. And that's the most important stuff. So if you've got an assumption, and the assumption in this case is, will my customers use an app? Then don't go ahead and build it. Test it first, validate all of those assumptions. If you're saying to me that you've sent out an email to all of your customers and 30% have clicked the link, loads of people try to download, and then people are emailing you angry that they can't use your app, that's a good reason to start building it. So yeah, you might piss off a few customers in doing that, but imagine how happy they're going to be when they get that app. It's like, it's not going to ruin it's not going to be life changing for them just that they can't download the app now rather than in 3 months' time. Like, these are the sorts of things you can test. They're very brutal examples, and you can maybe do it in a lot softer way. But this is the sort of thing. And in the same way that if somebody says, I don't know what to charge for my service, it's like, I've got customers on there free, like a really cheeky answer is, well, just keep putting your prices up until 20% of your customers churn, right? Then you're at the right point. You can test all of this stuff. And there are loads and loads of tools you can use out there to test these things out. You can literally build a landing page in an hour with a free tool. So there's loads of stuff you can do. So you can do loads of testing. So I've just got far too many examples of people who've built stuff that they don't need. And it is especially heartbreaking when I hear about someone who has literally poured their life savings into something new, like a new business or a new app, far too early. So launching an app should be treated like all other ideas that you've got within your business. So you prioritize your ideas based on how impactful they're going to be, how easy they're going to be, how much resources. You only want to be using the really impactful stuff first. You should be prioritizing that and working on those things relentlessly. If one of those things is an app, then do it. If it's not, then work on the other stuff and grow your business that way. Apps are expensive and they need to be maintained, and there can be a huge overhead. So launching one at the wrong time is wrong. Test stuff out. If you're failing, you're learning. I know it's a cliche, oh, you know, you have to try and you have to fail and all that stuff, but you really, really do, like, test stuff out as much as you can and learn from it. I spoke to a business owner recently, someone who's got an amazing business, and they'd launched an app to run alongside it. And the app was dire, like awful. And I actually had a conversation about it, and I questioned whether they actually needed that app at all. And the response was that, oh, it was being updated, and you know, it wouldn't be long before it would all ready and it's going to be better. And eventually it was updated, and it was just as bad, if not worse. But my point was that business didn't even need an app. But what happened in that case is that person had fell into a trap, like a lot of people do, a lot of business owners do, that because they've got it, it's almost like, oh, well, we're not too far away now. And it's a gambler's mentality. It's like when you see people like they've literally gambled everything on black or whatever in the casino. I'm not a gambler, so I don't really know the terminology. But then it's like, oh, I just want that next win. I just want that next win. There has to be a point where you just say, stop. Do you know what? That didn't work. I'm going to focus my energy elsewhere. So I hope that hasn't seemed that I'm anti-app in any way, shape or form, because I'm not. And in the next section, I'm going to talk about how, if you've gone through this process and you're ready for an app, you know, what you can do to go ahead and build it and all the sort of steps you can take. Think carefully. Is it the most important thing you need to be doing in your business? And if you feel it is, then test the shit out of it first.
A question came through earlier about templates, to ask if there's templates available that people can use to do their design planning on.
Yes, there is. Yeah, absolutely. I subscribe to a service called Invato Elements. I think it's about 30 quid a month or something. It's not very much in the grand scale of things. They literally have templates for everything. So like if you want to do mock-ups for products, if you want, there's like full app designs in there, like from start to finish, video templates, loads of stuff. Like no one generally knows about this service, and there's everything on there. So you can have a browse around stuff like that. But yes, if you can find a template, especially in the early days, that's going to do the job for you, just to get you to an MVP, then yeah, absolutely, like use it. Like, and you'll probably find that a lot of these templates, they're done by designers, so you might have to play about with, you know, UX bits and pieces, and you've still got to test and move things about. But as a base, like somewhere to start, absolutely. And yes, you can use them, and yes, they are available. iOS templates, app templates, all that sort of stuff, and they come with all the different responsive screens. It's relatively, you know, easy in that sense to go ahead and do. There's an app called Sketch, which is $99 a year. You can download the Sketch templates in Invato Elements, put them into Sketch, and really like play about with them. It's like a vector-driven design app. It's really cool. Like you can literally design a whole app yourself. Like it's a learning curve, but it's very low in comparison to a lot of tools out there. Very visual, very easy to use. So, you know, you could download a template, put it into Sketch, and there's a couple of things called prototyping tools. There's one called Envision, and the one I like is called Marvel. Google Marvel prototype, you'll be able to find it. These then link with Sketch. So what you can then do is basically export these things, and you can have a working demo on your phone, like visual, all works. And with Marvel, you can literally draw pieces of paper where you want your buttons, take photos of them and make it clickable. Yes, it's not going to have the database and stuff behind it, but for usability, for testing, it's amazing. All of this stuff you can do yourself. You can do in-house if you've got the resources before you go and spend any money on development. So yes, you can test these things as much as you like. The tools exist out there. Again, though, just to put caution in that, just because those tools exist and it's exciting and it's fun, I don't want you all to go and download that. Oh, actually, sounds easy to build an app. Maybe I'll do it. It's like, oh, hold on, sunshine. Let's go back to point one. Do you need it? Yes, it might sound fun and exciting, but don't get distracted. If this isn't the most important thing in your business, put it in some ideas and prioritize it first. Just because you can do it doesn't mean you should do it. And that's the difference. And that's the problem with a lot of these things. And I get so excited about these things, like, oh, new service, like, but you have to be disciplined with your time. It's the only thing, we've got a finite resource of it, right? So we focus on the right stuff at the right time. If building an app is right for you. So I've done all this. How do I then go about getting an app? So I just want to talk a little bit, and we've covered some of this now, just between the difference between product and engineering. Now, when I launched Fill My Belly, I had absolute no tech experience. I mean, there was no apps or anything. This is going back to 2006. So we're talking end of 2005, I really started to research this. Absolute zero tech experience at all. I just thought that a web designer could build anything. That was my perception. Oh, I need a web person to be able to do all this stuff. Whereas actually, I didn't really understand there's a big difference between product and engineering. So product, like product design, is literally all of the stuff that I've just spoke about before. So as you can see, like now I can do all of the product stuff, and I've realized I'm really good at product. I'm really good at figuring out what customers want and testing all that stuff and how the flow will work through. But that doesn't make me an app developer or a web developer, but it does make me a product manager. And when I was at Just Eat, I ran the product team for the restaurant solution. So all of the technology that's in the restaurants themselves, that was handled by me. So you might find that you're naturally good at product, but don't realize it. And that's what happens to me. Engineering, on the other hand, is actually then when it goes someone to physically go ahead and code all that stuff, put it all together, wire it all up in the back end, create the database. I have not got a clue how all that works. That's where I then need that assistance. But understanding the difference between those things and having the confidence to test this out at the beginning helps you then figure out, like, you don't have to go and commission a web developer straight away. You can do a lot of this stuff yourself. And to answer that question about, do I outsource it in the UK, in India and stuff like that? Like, I've used an Indian development company, so had a team of 5 developers and actually spent a couple of weeks in India. Like, it was an amazing place. But like the product side of stuff, I all did myself. So essentially it was the stuff under the hood. Now, I don't know whether that code was terrible or not terrible or whatever, but it worked. And at that point, I didn't care. It worked, and that was good enough for me. That was the stage that we were at. I've worked with developers who spend so much time and their code has to be perfect and it will pass the Pepsi challenge against any other piece of code out there. But it's if the code's perfect, but the product isn't working, then you've got this, and it's like having a really nice steam cleaned engine in like a 40-year-old Ford Fiesta that's rusting and falling apart. Nothing against Ford Fiestas, it's just that was my first car and it was rusting and falling apart. So that's the difference between products and engineering. So if you're at a stage where you can outsource this and you've got everything built and you've got all the feedback, which I'm going to cover now, then get some quotes from different sort of developers. You can use offshore teams, you can develop in-house. All of those things just really depends on your business and whether your app's going to be used by one person or 100,000 people. And obviously you're going to spend more the more people that you want are going to use it. So understanding what your customers want from an app is really important before you actually go ahead and pay anybody to do it. And you can figure this out with wireframes, by understanding the UX, by creating prototypes, and then getting that to an MVP. And everything apart from the build MVP stage, you can probably do without speaking to a single web developer. You might even be able to do an MVP from those prototypes itself, or you might just need a little bit of engineering support. But that's the difference. When you start this testing process, you've got to get this out into the hands of your customers, not just friends and family. Now, there's often a big objection for people doing this and for talking about your ideas. And I could talk about this in a whole different talk, but getting this out into the hands of your customers is really, really important. If you've got an idea, you need to be talking about it. And a lot of the reason that people don't talk about it, and I didn't do this with Fill My Belly, I came up with the idea in 2004 and I kept it to myself because I thought it was so good and so unique and so amazing, someone would rip it off. Actually, I did talk about it in the end of 2005, but the fact is, only when I started talking about it did that idea get traction. People weren't going to go ahead and rip that off because it wasn't their idea. It wasn't their passion. They weren't as excited about it as what I had. Even that person that I spoke to about it was going to be my business partner. And then he left because he wasn't excited. I was excited. It was like, look, it's your baby. You need to go ahead and do this. And I did. And it was successful. People aren't necessarily going to rip off your idea. So just get out there and talk about it. Get this into your hands of your customers. Get that user feedback. When you do come to build stuff, and this is whether you outsource it, insource it, send it over to a different country, there are some options you can make very early on, some questions you can ask that will actually save you a lot of time and effort. So you choose the code base carefully. Now, as I mentioned, I'm not an expert in this, but I've got a reasonable understanding. So in the last app that I used, we used a technology called React Native. Don't know anything about it apart from that 99% of the code of that code base we could use across iOS and Android. So basically, we weren't developing an Android app and then we had to rewrite it. So if you build natively, I think that's generally what you have to do. Feel free to argue this point. And now with the new Apple announcements, like they're moving over to their own custom silicon, so the same chips that are in the phones and the iPads, it's probably going to be a shared code base between those as well. When you're actually developing this stuff, just going back to what I was saying, if at any stage when you're doing this testing, if you don't feel it's working for the customer, if you're not getting that love from the customer, if they're not interested, if they're not going through it, then just stop. And don't be afraid to stop. And don't fall into that gambler's mentality of, oh, well, I've actually spent 6 months testing and all of this stuff. Now, we might as well just go that extra mile and finish it. No, don't. That's exactly what you've just done. You've just tested it and your customers don't want it. So why do you think if you then go ahead and build it, it's going to be any different? It's not. Just stop. Again, not anti-app, but this is the problem that I see. There's a whole point in testing. And if you're testing and it's like that test fails, you haven't failed, your business hasn't failed. What you've just done is prevented yourself from spending time, effort, energy, money on something that's not going to work. You've literally just proved it. That is not a failure. You've just learned something. SpaceX posted recently, just before they launched their thing to their space station, like a rocket exploding. Everyone's going mad on Instagram, like saying, "Oh, why have you just posted this? It's bad." It's like, because they tested something and failed. They wouldn't be at the point that they were if they hadn't have tested that rocket and it hadn't exploded. Nobody died. It was just a controlled test, right? But that's it. So don't be afraid to stop something if it's not working. However, on the final note, I just want to say, when you do find things that work, so if you're testing something and customers love a part of your app, they love a part of your business, then double down on those things. Like really put your foot on the gas, accelerate on them. Do not slow down. If you're successful, if you're finding out the stuff that works, then absolutely go for it relentlessly and just make that stuff the business as usual. But don't stop. Test some more stuff and test some more stuff. And then as you go back to that graph at the beginning, you've actually got those things that you're trying, testing, failing, trying, testing, succeeding. And then eventually that curve starts to go up. And that's how it all works. So I hope that makes sense. So on to your final questions now. Over to you.
I love your point. Just make sure you actually do need an app before you go down that route of putting all of that money in. But when we're talking about the cost of it, kind of, is there an average cost to developing an app, Bertie, or is it like never ending if you choose it to be?
It can be either. You can get something developed relatively quickly. Like if you go through the whole prototype stage and design something, because that design layer is the front layer, and then basically it's just APIs that talk to a database. If you just need a couple of things essentially wiring in, then it's not going to be very much, because the great thing with the App Store is depending on, like, they control all of the distribution, all that stuff for you. So it can be relatively low cost. You could get something done for a couple of grand. But there are also like white label cookie cutter apps, which a couple of years ago, Apple said, no, we're not doing these anymore. But now you can literally go on and almost like create your own app on different services. They'll launch it to the App Store and do all that sort of stuff. You can get that relatively cheap. It's a very open-ended question, but you can make something really, really special for relatively low cost if you follow those steps. I know I've summarized it into a very quick, sort of talk, but I hope you get the idea of what I was trying to say there. So yeah, it could be a lot. I mean, just as a ballpark, right? One of the examples that I had earlier was a business that I'd invested in. I then worked with them to look at what was going off because they were just hemorrhaging money. They'd produced an iOS app in native iOS language, and then they were porting that app to Android, and that was costing, I think it was 60 grand they'd already spent on it, and it was costing, the total cost was going to be 100. When we looked at the iOS app, it was doing a couple of bookings a day, if that. The revenue generating, and we're talking at less than 10 quid. So 100 grand of revenue, 100 grand of spend could far be better spent on pushing that existing app. Yes, you've got the occasional person that's like, well, why aren't you an Android? It's like, well, we're coming soon. You use the web. But, that was a very expensive app to produce, and essentially it was built twice. But the correct decision there was to stop building that app.
We've got another question that's come in around cybersecurity. What's your comments and thoughts on cybersecurity for apps?
Speak to a cybersecurity expert. I mean, it's like, I'm not an expert in this stuff, but there's a lot of common sense, I think, that goes around cybersecurity. And when you're building stuff, just make sure that you're putting in the right steps initially. So in a couple of apps that I've sort of worked on, we've made sure that passwords and stuff are hashed at the beginning, so we can never physically see them. When we've done things with location, even during testing, even as tempting as it is, it's like, well, just during testing, maybe we'll capture location data and that sort of stuff. Like we've always made those decisions early on, because if you capture too much data at the early stage, then you've got that data is then a risk, right? So the more data you hold on someone, if someone accesses it, that's a risk. So minimize the risks as much as you can. If we just look at this track and trace app, right? Like I've just been saying it's, to go into that, Apple and Google worked together, their first collaboration on an API to generate this decentralized, privacy-driven approach to it. And the NHS rejected it, from my understanding, primarily because they wanted the control of the data. They wanted the centralized data, even though they were going to delete that afterwards, they said. But it's like, once they had that data, like how useful is that when you've got people's locations, their uses habits and stuff like that? Like no one's going to ever want to delete that data. And even if people have seen it, they can access it. So now they're going to the decentralized approach and trying that one. So if you start off by really saying, do I need to capture this customer's information? Do I need to know where they are? Do I need to see their photos? The less data you can have, the more secure it's going to be. But for the actual locking and stuff down, speak to a cybersecurity expert, but somebody within a developer is going to be able to advise you on that.
Yeah. Someone saying ncsc.gov.uk, good source for security. Thank you, Adrian. Good one. I've got another one in from Kate. Morning, Kate. Good to have you with us. At what stage do you bring in legal advice on an app development?
Probably much later on. Again, you've got to assess what the risk is with stuff, and this can almost become a distraction at the beginning, like, oh, I need my terms and conditions and stuff like that. It's like, I'm not advising you not to launch stuff without all that, but you've got to assess what the risk is, right? If you're doing these like little smoke tests and things like that, like I feel personally, do whatever you want. I feel you don't need to waste time, effort, energy, money on all of that stuff early on. Of course, when you launch, you're going to need all of that, all of that stuff. But again, there are sites like Rocket Lawyer, I don't know if they're American based, but like template sites, which will be enough to get you through. So with Fill My Belly, for example, I use template terms and conditions, bastardize them from other people's terms and conditions, made do. When it came to then selling that business, and as we got bigger, there were things then that I had to take a little bit more seriously, and it sort of evolved. But you don't have to go and do that early on. It can be a distraction and can slow you down testing stuff. If anybody does have any questions that they want to get in touch directly, just don't put it off. Just get in touch, and I'm more than happy to chat over any more that I've spoke about today, or anything else business related. That's what I'm here for. I love doing it.
So we've got lots of thanks, Bertie's coming in. If again, everyone in our audience, if you'd like to join our mailing list and be part of our community, it would be wonderful to have you on board. The link is in the chat. You've got a couple of moments to grab it. if you're interested. And with that, I'm going to do the newfound applause to Bertie. Thank you.
Brilliant, thank you.
Be safe, Bertie. Have a great day, everyone. We look forward to welcoming you back to our next session.
Excellent. Thanks a lot. Thanks, everyone. And
Bye.
thank you. Take care.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye-bye.